everyone. Thank you for joining our virtual dental shadowers session. We want to remind you that there will not be a quiz today, but you can find more info in our link tree in our Instagram bio. All right, let's get started. We are very fortunate to have Marco for today's session. I'm handing the mic to you. Feel free to start whenever you want.
Cool, yeah. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's very exciting to be here today and get to talk to you all. Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm a third year at LSU Dental, if you can't tell by my LSU shirt and LSU white coat here. Just trying to rep it out for you guys. So just a little bit about myself. I went to University of Arkansas before I started dental school, and I got a BA in economics. So I think that just goes to show that you don't have to have a biology degree or a chemistry degree. Like, you should be majoring in whatever you're interested in, because you're probably going to get the best grades in that because you're going to enjoy your work. Like, I enjoyed my economics degree thoroughly. If I didn't get into dental school, I probably would have continued studying economics. But I love dental school. It's great. New Orleans is a lot of fun. I highly encourage you guys to check out our program down here. It's the most clinically advanced in the country. You see your very first patient at the end of your D1 year. My class wasn't able to do that because of COVID, but this year's D1 class, who are now D2s, actually just saw their first patient yesterday, and you do a cleaning on them. And then you start treating patients your second year. So I think I saw 16 patients this year, just doing restorations and perio work and evaluations and things like that. So if you want to get your hands ready and up to speed, there's no better school in the country than LSU. So first thing we're going to talk about is tips for taking the DAT. The DAT can be super overwhelming, and I say that not because of the test itself, but because of the amount of material that there is, not just on the test, but on the internet. So what the very first thing I would advise you to do is make a study plan and stick to it. So I know DAT Bootcamp, that's kind of like the gold standard. That's pretty much all I used, and it went fine. There are other study plans that you can use. You can peruse online. But what I would do is find what works for you and then stick with it. So if you know that you're a slow learner and you need extra time to really comprehend everything, you might want to choose a study plan that's longer for you, versus if you're someone like me who has to study all day, every day for a few weeks and cram it down in there, then a shorter plan would probably be for you. And then it's also based on what classes you've taken versus what classes you've already taken. So if you're taking it at the end of your sophomore year versus at the end of your junior year, if you take it at the end of your junior year, you're probably taking a lot more science classes. So you may not have to study as much because you've been exposed to that material. As far as study materials go, I would say 3 to 4 is the absolute max. So use boot camp and then supplement that with maybe some videos and like the bio, the AP bio textbook. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Sorry, it's been a couple of years since I've taken the DAT. It's probably been about 4 or 5 years, but I know boot camp is the standard, and practice tests are key. You can order practice tests. You can find them online. I don't know if it's 100% legal to find them online, so be careful with that. But when you're going through all of that, practice tests can be diagnostic, but they're also not the end of the world. So, for example, when I was studying for my DAT, 3 days before my DAT, I took a practice test, and on the Gen Chem section, I got a 16. And I was like, oh, this is not going to go well. And then the next day I took another practice test and I got a 24. And I was like, oh, something must have happened yesterday. And then when I got to the real DAT, I ended up making a 20 on that section. So I was like, well, I guess that was kind of an indicator in the middle. But what practice tests are really good for is don't just take them and dump them. Take them and then see what you were familiar with and then what you were unfamiliar with versus what wild guesses you had. Because a problem that I see a lot of times with people taking the DAT is that they focus heavily on the things that they already know because it's easier and they feel a better sense of accomplishment. But what you need to be doing is quite the opposite, where you actually need to be studying the information that you don't know and trying to build that up And I think that's going to help your score dramatically because, 9 times out of 10, the things that you already know, you're probably going to get them right. So yeah, it's easy to study that and feel good about yourself, but really take the time to figure out from your practice tests what you don't know and then try and develop those skills. So studying for the DAT is just the very beginning of it, and it's hard to stay motivated through it. I remember, I lived in a fraternity house for 2 years, and most of the guys in there were business majors, and I'm taking biochem and orgo and physiology and all this other stuff, and I was looking around and I was like, man, like these guys don't really have to study near as much as I do. Like, what the heck is that all about? And it's hard to stay motivated. It's easy to get distracted, but you have to realize a couple different points. And the first is that this isn't quite school, more so as it is an investment on your future. I mean, if you look at it from a technical standpoint, yeah, it is school, but more so it's you trying to create a better future for yourself and your family. Because, a lot of people get a biology major, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But if you graduate and you don't get into dental school, you just give up, then what are you going to do? You're going to go teach high school, or you're going to go do research, things like that. And like those are all notable careers, but from a monetary standpoint, it makes a lot more sense to go to dental school and maximize your earning potential. And with that being said, the sooner you start, the sooner you're done. So take your studies seriously, because if you don't get a good GPA in undergrad, then you're probably going to have to go get a master's degree, or if you don't do well on the DAT, you'll probably have to take it again. And a gap year is not the end of the world. Several of my classmates took a gap year and were better off for it. They just took that year to save some money up and to work and just kind of decompress after undergrad. I personally didn't do that. I'm glad where I'm at now, even though it kind of would have been nice to have a year off. I think the maturity aspect would have also been there. But the sooner you start, the sooner you're done. So don't kick the can down the road and just delay being a doctor. When you could be a doctor sooner, you could be earning that money sooner, you could be doing what you love sooner, you could be out of school and choosing your career path sooner. Like, dentistry is one of the most flexible careers in the country, where you can work anywhere you want. There's always going to be a job lined up for you. There's always going to be money for you. And you're always going to be helping people each and every day and doing something that's hands-on and physical. You're not sitting behind a computer, as we've all gotten so used to with Zoom, and just having to type away all day or look at spreadsheets or do accounting or things like that. Like, you're physically getting to do something, and you're getting to help people at the same time. And another piece is that this is what you signed up for. So, I don't think anyone that's watching this is being forced to go into dentistry. Like, it's just not one of those things. It's such a rigorous process that you can't be forced to do it. You have to do it because you're passionate about it. And in those times where you feel like you have no motivation, just remember what it's going to be like on the other side. Like, even in dental school, like, we have this saying that it's like we prayed to be here. Like, I remember sitting in bed, just being like, God, like, please let me into dental school. Like, I just really want to be a doctor one day. Like, and then, prayers were answered and we got in. And, it doesn't get easier in dental school. It gets more interesting, but it doesn't get easier. But you can learn to have fun with it. Like, I know some of the people in undergrad that I was in pre-dental clubs with and whatnot, those ended up being some of my best friends. And we still have group texts and we still talk all the time. And whenever we're back in town, we'll get lunch and things like that. So that leads us to our last point, where you just need to lean on others. And, you can't do this by yourself. Like, dental school, you will not do by yourself. We make Google Drives and people upload study guides, and we'll have review sessions. Like, there's one guy in my class that actually had a master's in anatomy and physiology. So whenever we were taking anatomy D one year, he would actually host review sessions and help supplement our education, help teach us. And a lot of people made a lot better grades because of his lessons. So you're going to have to find your strong suits, and you'll be able to do that in undergrad some too. Like, maybe you're just like a biochem wizard. Like, maybe you're just a anatomy wizard. Like, whatever it may be, use that to help others. That way, whenever you're struggling in a section, they can help you out. But ultimately, like, I'll tell y'all, like, undergrad is fun. Dental school is fun. Like, you just got to learn to have fun with it and take a deep breath. Like, you're not going to make an A on every single test, and that's okay. Like, I remember my first couple tests in dental school, I got really bummed out because, I wasn't making as high of grades as I thought I would, but realized that, it's a faster pace and the rigor of the material is just so much greater. But you're where you need to be. Like, the hardest part of dental school is getting in. Once you're in, like, I guarantee you that you'll pass. So some different components of the application. So community service, this is kind of a weird one to talk about because of COVID. So a lot of people, especially in this upcoming application cycle, have asked the questions of like, oh, like, I don't have a lot of community service hours. Like, COVID shut everything down and I wasn't able to do a lot. Well, you're not the only one. That's been pretty much the standard because we were all going through COVID. If you live in the South, maybe it wasn't as bad because things opened up sooner, or in the North where restrictions are a bit more there. But either way, dental school, when you're applying, there's no like checklist. They're like, okay, you don't have 100 hours, like we can't accept you. Things like that. Besides the DAT. For the DAT, there's some minimums that you have to meet for certain schools. But besides that, it doesn't really matter. So, if you're behind the curve, if you only have 25 hours and everyone else has 100 hours, then yeah, that doesn't look good. But in this case, where everyone may only have like 25, 30 hours because of COVID, well, then that doesn't look near as bad. But as things open back up, you really want to get that community service in. And my biggest advice for you all in this section is that don't do it because you're checking off a box. Like, don't do it because you need 100 hours. 100 hours is pretty much like the standard. Like, anything above that is great, but anything below that's kind of like, like, we'll see. But do community service because hopefully you'll be doing community service for the rest of your life. Like, once you get to dental school, like, you'll still do community service events. And once you graduate, you'll still provide free care every once in a while or see Medicaid patients. And, I take some losses on that, but you do it because of the compassion in your heart. And that's why I say, do what you're passionate about with community service. Like, schools do not care if it's dental related or not. There's really no difference. Like, if you're just doing something for the sake of doing it versus if you're passionate about it or not, that's going to be clearly evident when you go interview at the schools. And they're going to ask you about your community service, and just the way that you talk about it and how excited you get or how animated you get is going to reflect whether or not you were just checking off a box or whether you were passionate about it. So, I think we were all put on this earth to help others, and dentistry is one of the greatest ways to do that. Sorry, I'm fighting off a sneeze here. I don't know if it's going to happen. But, sorry. Man, I really got to sneeze. It's just not coming out. There it is. So I know people that worked in soup kitchens. I know that people that played in elementary schools. Like, it can be literally anything as long as you're making a difference in your community, because with dentistry, you're able to make a difference every day. And you're going to have to put up with a lot of things with patients. And sometimes they don't show up on time, or sometimes they're not very nice, or things like that. And, there's a bunch of crazy stories I could tell you all from clinic, but, you do it because you care about others and you were given a skill and an ability to do something. So it's our responsibility to give back. So, community service, it's not a major part of your application, but it should be a major part of your life. So as far as choosing dental schools, I cannot reiterate this enough. Wherever you get in-state tuition, if you get into that school, you need to go, because you're probably going to get the highest chance of getting into your in-state school, and it's going to be the lowest cost. And dental school is just getting more and more expensive. I will say the South in general has better programs if you're looking for clinic, and a lot of that has to do with the amount of students versus the amount of patients. So, for example, if you go to New York and you go to like NYU or you go to Columbia, and I can say this because I know people that go to both of those schools, you're not going to see near as many patients as if you go to LSU or Florida or Alabama, because their classes are so much larger. I have 78 people in my class versus they might have 150 or 200 people in their class. So physically, there's just more students that need to see patients in the areas. They might be more densely populated, but they may not have more people going to the dental school. So whenever you're looking around at schools, I would reach out to students and see how many patients they get to see, what their clinical requirements are, and all of that. Like I know there's one school up north that for operative, their D4 like graduation requirements were the same as my D2 sophomore just get it done requirements. So as you could probably guess, like I'll be much better off because I've seen so many more patients in clinic than they have. So cost is the biggest thing unless you're going the military route, but even then the military is getting so much more competitive. I'm in the National Guard. I love it. But if you're going the HPSP route, like it's just unbelievably competitive. They also cut the spots in half, so that kind of plays into it. But also like it's expensive to apply. Like between interviews and applications and everything, I spent over $3,000 on my applications. So you need to be kind of selective on where you want to go. So I would apply to your in-state schools, and then I would apply to a few that you just apply to like just for fun. Like it looks like a good place to be. Like I had some friends up in Pennsylvania, and then my family is originally from New York. I knew I didn't want to go to dental school in New York, so I applied to University of Pennsylvania. I got an interview there, but I matriculated to LSU and accepted my spot there before the interview. But it would have been a fun place to go. I applied to Louisville because Louisville looks like a really fun place and a really fun part of the country. And then I applied just a few other schools. But you also want to look at the cost of living and then what living in that area looks like. So, you know, if you have a dog and you don't want to be cooped up in an apartment, you want a house, then you need to look at an area where, you know, the cost of living may allow you to have a house versus being cooped up in a small apartment because it's so expensive to live there. Versus if you love the city life, then yeah, maybe you might want to go to Los Angeles, maybe you might want to go to New York or places like that. Also, some schools, you don't stay in the same place for all 4 years. You may do 2 years doing your didactics and preclinical somewhere, and then your third and fourth year, you go to a completely different area, which is usually within the same state. So those are all things that you need to look into. So what a typical day is like. So it's kind of, this is like one of the hardest questions to answer because it's not like undergrad where like you have class Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or you have Tuesday, Thursdays. Dental school blocks are very random, and like you might have a 4-hour class on Tuesday morning, and then that's it for that class on the week. And then you might have a class on Monday and Wednesday afternoons. But then on the Wednesday afternoon, after that class, you have a lab, but on Mondays, like, you just get to go home. And then Fridays, like, might just be a complete clinic day. So it changes every semester. Some schools are more uniform. LSU is not at all. Like, I started a class in March, and then I just took the final last week. Versus some classes like started in October and they didn't finish until May. It's very rare that a class starts at the beginning of a semester and ends at the end of a semester. But what I will say is moving from D1, so it's like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. D1 is freshman, D2 is sophomore, D3 is junior, D4 is senior. But your first year, you're just taking a lot of sciences and your fundamentals. So you're going to get your hands wet in the preclinical lab, and you're going to be drilling on plastic teeth, and you're going to be learning how to wax teeth, and you're going to learn the morphology, which is like the basic shapes and structures and little factoids about teeth. And it's very exciting, but you're also taking a lot of classes such as anatomy and physiology and microbiology and pathology and all those things. Like I know at some schools, like I'm pretty sure it's Harvard, where their first year medical and their first year dental students pretty much take the same classes. Like they're actually like taking classes together. So your first year is going to look a lot like medical school, where you're just taking basic sciences and like trying to learn about the human body, but then you incorporate a little bit of dental. So then your second year is where you're really getting hands-on in preclinical. So you have like fixed prosthodontics. So like learning how to do a crown prep and like put a crown on a tooth, and an intro to endodontics. So like doing your first root canal on a plastic tooth or an extracted tooth, and then removable partial dentures and full dentures and all those things, like getting you ready for when you finally go to clinic. Now, LSU is a little different here. So on Fridays, we would actually be treating patients. Like Fridays were awesome because like Monday through Thursday you grind, and then Friday, like you're just seeing patients. And then your third year is you're going to have some advanced preclinical classes. So you might have like advanced head and neck anatomy, intro to implants, advanced orthodontics, like advanced removables, things like that. But it's basically just like teaching you like some of the more minute details, where the second year gives you the foundation. And then you're also just like getting into clinic and seeing patients pretty often. So then your fourth year is your residency. That's what I call it. It's not actually your residency. But your fourth year is where you're seeing patients and treating them pretty much every day. Like you're not really doing much else. You might take some business classes here and there. Like you're going to take some selectives. So let's say you're more interested in cosmetics, well, you might take a cosmetics selective. Or if you're interested in endodontics, then you're going to go take an endodontics selective and things like that. But your fourth year is really just like getting you up to speed and getting you ready for the real world, because that's what separates dental from medical. So medical, you have to do a residency after medical school to practice, versus dental, you don't. A lot of people, most people, actually finish dental school and then they just go straight into private practice, whether that's working for corporate or working for a mom and pop dental shop, things like that. Some people will do a general practice residency just to get, because some of those can be tailored. You know, if you want to do cosmetics more so, then you might do a GPR that's more focused on that. Or like if you want to do oral surgery, but you don't want to be an oral and maxillofacial surgeon, you can do a 1 year GPR that's more tailored to that, that does a lot of like implants. Or you can specialize, whether that's pediatrics, orthodontics, things like that. So that's pretty much it. I hope you guys have some questions, and I hope that wasn't too fast or anything, but I'm just trying to get through all this material here.
All right, so we will be beginning our Q&A portion. And our first question says, what were your backup careers if you didn't get into dental school?
Yeah, so that was part of the reason why I chose an economics degree, because I knew that if I didn't get into dental school, I didn't want to go teach high school or get a master's in something I wasn't really interested in or things like that. I probably would have gone into investment banking, or I would have worked corporate for like Tyson or Walmart, because those are both like major corporations that are based in Northwest Arkansas, and a lot of my friends actually work at those places. So here's what I tell people, and I actually got asked this question at my University of Missouri Kansas City interview, because they asked what I would do if I didn't get into school, and I said, well, I would ask the admissions committee why I was not accepted. You don't ask it that way, though. You say, what can I do to improve my application for next year? And they'll usually tell you, like, oh, you know, your DAT was just too low, or your GPA was too low, or like you just really didn't have any shadowing hours or things like that. So I would spend a year like trying to improve all of that while reapplying. And then if I got rejected a second time, then I would probably just start working my career and call it a day for dentistry. So thankfully I got in, but you know, I kind of discourage people from having a backup plan, but it's also important because you don't want to apply like 5 years in a row and just constantly get rejected. But I will say a lot of people don't get in on the first try. So that's why you need to work hard now to make your application as competitive as possible.
Second question says, I know you mentioned LSU has an early clinical start. What is clinic like? Do you have to find and book your patients yourself?
So that is a very important question, and I'm glad it was asked, because that is a major like differentiating factor amongst schools. So some schools, you have to find your patients yourself. So that means like going out into the community, like handing out business cards, like trying to recruit folks, versus LSU. We are like I don't even know if you can get an appointment at LSU right now. Like we are so booked solid. So what happens is a patient will come to LSU and they say, hey, I want to be a patient here. And we say, okay, well, let's get you in. So they randomly get assigned to a third or fourth year. And that third or fourth year does an oral diagnosis on them, which is like a full workup, like x-rays and all. And once that is done, we write up a treatment plan for them. And once that treatment plan is determined, the third and fourth year we'll usually see them. And then if there's some work that's eligible for second years, it gets passed down to the second year. And also how it works at LSU is I don't know how many of you are familiar with like bigs and littles and like fraternity and sorority life, but we have a similar thing where it's called your mini clinic. So I have a big, since I'm a D3 and he's a D4, and then I chose a D2 to be my little, and then he is now going to have who's my grand little. So it's the four of us, and all of our patients get pooled into that mini clinic, and it allows for continuity between providers. So clinic is a lot of fun. It's a lot more fun than studying for a test because like even when you're in a long day of clinic, you can like go home and like have a beer after, and you don't have to like study versus, whenever you're like in the thick of D2 or the thick of D1 where it's like, okay, like you've been at school all day. Now you have to go home and study for another couple of hours. It's grueling, but clinic is a lot of fun. You're going to have a lot of weird patients. They're going to do some crazy things, but there's also a lot of like really nice people out in the world. But that would be another huge question to ask schools that you're interested in is how do they recruit patients? Because like, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to bad talk some other schools, but I know some other schools that you pretty much get thrown out into the wind and you have to just recruit your own patients. And because of that, some people don't get a lot of clinical experiences because they just don't know how to sell themselves, and it's hard to just like go out into the community and do that. So good question.
Next question says, does the number of patients you see change based on your year?
Based on your year?
Yes.
Yes. So, third year, you're still going to be taking some classes, so you're not going to see quite as many patients. Second year, you only see patients 1 day a week, so you're not seeing near as many, but it's more so to get you like clinically exposed and, get your hands ready. And then fourth year, you're pretty much seeing patients every day. So as you get further through it, more and more of what you're doing, they're going to let you see more patients and do more advanced cases because, as a second year, like you're probably not going to be proficient in delivering a full set of dentures versus a fourth year, like be kind of concerning if a fourth year didn't know how to deliver dentures. So as you progress through and you get better, you see more patients.
How often do you get a chance to work on cases that would otherwise be sent to specialists?
Well, what's cool about dental school is that you get to see a lot of interesting things. And if you don't know what to do, you're surrounded by a lot of people who do know what to do. So anytime I was seeing cases this past year, and it was just like I had this one tooth, and it was supposed to just be like two different surfaces, like pretty straightforward, but then the decay ended up kind of being everywhere. So I had to like drill like the whole tooth away and then basically build a brand new tooth out of composite. Like she really should get a crown at some point, but like that's besides the point. But it was nice because like you have your bay leaders who are walking you through it every step of the way. And then once you get into third year, you'll actually do rotations. You'll do, and again, this is all from the perspective of LSU, so other schools may be different. But, we do 2 weeks with every specialty. So you'll get exposed to all of those advanced cases. And then, if you refer a patient out to a specialist, like in dental school, they're still your responsibility. So you'll probably go to their appointment or at least check in on them. And you'll be in contact with all those folks. So you're involved in their treatment plan every step of the way because ultimately you're the provider. And, that's how it's going to be whenever you get into private practice. You refer a patient out and they may go see the specialist, but then they come back in for just like a routine checkup, and you're checking to make sure that the specialist did the work as indicated and to make sure that everything went well.
Do dental students go for residency only if they want to be better at specific treatments? Are there some schools that mandate residency for all students?
So no school mandates residency for all students, but there's two sides to that coin. One is that some states require a residency. So, for example, like the state of New York, you have to do either a specialty or you have to do a 1-year general practice residency in order to get a dental license in the state of New York. The other alternative is you have to go out of the state, get licensed in a different state, work there for 3 years, and then you can come back to New York with a New York license. So they're one of the most strict. Most states are not like that, where you can just, go out and practice. But I will say there are some schools out there where pretty much everyone specializes or does a 1-year general practice residency because their preclinical programs aren't as good. They're not seeing near as many patients. And overall, the students just aren't ready for the pace of real world dentistry private practice. So it could just be people wanting to get up to speed and wanting to get a lot better and a lot faster. But that's not always the case. Sometimes people do it. Like I know I'm considering a GPR right now back in Arkansas because you place like a ton of implants and you do a lot of surgery and you do a lot of like heavy lifting stuff is what we kind of call it. And that's more so the scope that I'm interested in, but I'm not necessarily interested in being an oral and maxillofacial surgeon. So I know a guy down in Miami who's doing a GPR down there because it's very heavy on like cosmetics and like veneers and crowns and things like that. And that's what he wants to tailor his practice to. So he saw it as an investment. And you get paid for a general practice residency, but you don't get paid near as much as you would if you were just a private practice dentist. But some people outweigh the cost where they say it's going to make me a lot faster. I'm going to get certain licenses because of it. And I'm going to be so much better that I'm going to be able to make more money as a general dentist than if I had never done the GPR, and that the benefits will outweigh the cost in the long term.
The next question says, do you ever have to fight for chairs in clinic? I've heard about schools where even if you have a patient, you may not be able to book them since you share your station with another student.
Yeah, so that was kind of the case during COVID, but not really. So I know, like, even with COVID this year as a D2, like on Fridays, like I had my own chair, and that was like my chair. And again, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where some schools just have like a ton of students, and like dental facilities are very, very expensive, so they may not have as many chairs as they do students. So in that case, yeah, but thankfully at LSU, like we have a lot of chairs versus for the number of students that we have. So you're never fighting for a chair. Like your fourth year, like you get your own cubicle, and that's like your space. Like no one can touch it or take it away from you. So that's just another thing to be cognizant about, is choosing which school you want to go to and what that looks like.
Your bio mentions that you're a District 5 trustee for ASDA. Can you elaborate a bit more on how you got that position and what your responsibilities are?
Yeah, so that's actually, is it on the site? No, it's on the site. Okay, yeah, so I'm trying to mirror it here, the American Student Dental Association. So ASDA is the governing body of dental students, essentially, and what it does is it protects the rights, interests, and welfare of dental students across the country. And part of our governing body is that there is a president, a speaker of the House, 2 vice presidents, and then 11 district trustees that make up the board of trustees. So the board of trustees is like the voting body that whenever ASDA makes like big decisions and whatnot, like we recently, I can't tell you what that one is yet because of how like we work, but we made a decision very recently that was part of like our structure and like how we're organized and all of that. But then that gets put to the board, and there's also like full-time staff on ASDA, but they run the show but we decide like what the show is, if that makes sense. But what the District 5 trustee does is I am over dental schools in Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, and Puerto Rico. So 7 schools in 5 different states. So it's a threefold job. So one is managing those schools locally. So each of them has like an ASDA chapter president and a whole executive team and all of that, and they manage their local operations. And that may be doing canned good drives, it may be doing toothbrush drives, it may be doing ASDA Fever Week, where like they're getting the student body engaged and teaching them what ASDA is all about. It could be a 9/11 memorial event. It could be an Instagram event or takeover. It could be so many different things. So I help manage those 7 schools and make sure that everyone's up to speed if they're having any problems with their administration or if they're having any problems with finances or things like that. Like, I'm kind of the point person to help resolve those matters. Now, I also have a cabinet of my own. So I also have like my own chief of staff and treasurer and pre-dental chairs and wellness chairs and all of that. And we try and coordinate district events. So, sorry, didn't realize I would have notifications pop up. But with District 5, we try and do events that either all the schools are doing at the same time or for the sake of all the students within those schools. So in January, we're going to have a District 5 conference. So my team is putting that together. For Pride Month in June, we're doing a lot of diversity and inclusion initiatives, whether that's little things like changing our logo to be more open and inclusive of those communities, or like sharing things on Instagram or like having Q&A sessions, whatever it may be. But yeah, so I manage my cabinet, and there's a lot of moving aspects with that. And we just try and host events throughout the year to keep our students engaged and learning and in communication with one another.
How do you balance your time between dental school, ASDA, and needed downtime? This seems so overwhelming.
Yeah, so I would say that I keep myself a lot busier than most of my counterparts. I don't think that like, oh my God, dental school is super overwhelming. Like, no, it's what you make of it. I will say that like, now that I'm done with D2 year, I feel like I have a lot more free time. Like even towards the end of D2 year, I started feeling that way. Like, you know, first year of dental school, like you're trying to get up to pace with everything, and like it can be very overwhelming because it's like, you know, it's not necessarily hard, but you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to drill on a maxillary tooth for the first time and learn how to look through a mirror, or you have this tiny little drill and you got to be within a millimeter, and it just seems overwhelming. But as you get used to it and as you practice more, you kind of just get acclimated to it. And you also figure out ways that you study. So for me, like it took me a while, but I finally figured out what was efficient for me and how I was able to study effectively versus studying for long periods of time. So I think that's a misconception, that you have to study for long periods of time in order to get good grades. You don't. You just have to figure out how you study and then do that effectively. But then it's also how you manage your days. So for me, like working out is important, and I like going to the gym. And that's, I think everyone should do that. I think like getting moving, whether you're going running each day or just out for a walk, like you need to be physically engaged in some way. But I would always be too tired when I got home from school. So this past year, I made a life change, and I started waking up at 4:45 every day, which is awful. Like it gets a lot easier, but it's never like, I never wake up at 4:45 and I'm like, man, like I'm really excited to start my day at 4:45 in the morning. But I do it, and then by 5:15, I'm at the gym. I get my workout in, I'm back, I'm showered, and I have breakfast, and it's like 7 a.m., 7:30, and I've felt productive, I feel good, and I don't have to worry about it for the rest of the day. So the rest of the day, like I have my quiet time, I can check my emails, I can get ready for school or clinic or whatever it is, and then you do what you got to do. And yeah, it's cyclistic in school. So like you'll have like a test week where you have like 5 tests and it's just very overwhelming. But then the week after that, like you don't really have too much going on, and you can manage like hanging out with your friends and whatnot. Or like I have a girlfriend now, so it's like I try and go see her on the weekends and things like that. So it's just getting used to your schedule and then being efficient. But it's like I don't sit around and play video games all day unless it's like summertime. Like I've been playing video games all day today, but it's because I'm on summer break. During the school week, like you have to be diligent on like, okay, did you study or did you play on your phone for several hours? Like you got to manage your time appropriately, and you have to be efficient in your time to allow yourself free time later. So like if you didn't do anything all week and now you want your weekend, well, probably gonna have to study during the weekend because you didn't study all week. Versus if you study for a couple hours each night and like just turn your phone off for a little bit and like be efficient, then you can take a break on the weekend and do what you want. Like it's not overwhelming. And even though it is, like it's kind of like with the DAT, like hundreds of thousands of people have taken the dental admission test, passed it, and got into school. Like it is a very doable thing. Dental school, hundreds of thousands of people have like got into dental school, been through the ringer, gotten through it, and are now doctors. Like it's very doable. It just takes a lot of commitment and a lot of patience and a lot of hard work, but it's totally worth it when you're on the other side. So I hope that answers your question.
What is the class size at LSU?
So you start out with 75, and then you might lose 1 or 2 just depending on life circumstances. We lost 2. Unfortunately, they didn't die, like not like that, but like they just did not continue with the program. And everyone has their personal reasons. It happens. It's usually 1 or 2. And then we, at the end of your D2 year, 5 international students join in. So we are at 78 right now.
What do you feel that the admissions committee at LSU is looking for in applicants?
They want someone who's well-rounded. So I know if you're out of state, then you're gonna need at least a 20 on the DAT. Don't quote me on that, but I'm like pretty sure it's at least a 20. It's getting more competitive. GPA, you're looking for a 3.6 or above on both like your science and your cumulative. 100 shadowing hours, 100 volunteer hours, and some extracurricular involvement. Like you can't just have a 25 on the DAT and a crap GPA and no shadowing. Like that, it's not good enough. Like they really want someone who's well-rounded and balanced. Versus some other schools, they might, if you have a 4.0 and a 22 on the DAT, then they may not really care about anything else. But I know at LSU, like they really want someone who's put in the effort and put in the work on all ends. So yeah, we've recently upped the amount of in-state spots we have. So that's a good thing. The class size used to be 65, now it's 75 because they added 10 out-of-state spots. So, even if you're not a Louisiana resident, that's okay. So yeah, just, get it all done.
Okay, and our last question is, what is something you struggled with in dental school?
So, where do I start on this one? I struggled with a lot of things when I got to dental school. I think, I don't want to say my mental health, but yeah, that was something that was the culmination of a lot of different factors. I started seeing a therapist, and that changed my life. I don't think there's any shame in seeing a therapist or anything wrong with seeing a therapist. It helped me talk through a lot of my emotions, and I'm a happy guy now, and I still see my therapist, and we just talk, and we just go through some things or some questions about life that I may have. So I suggest therapy for everyone. It's every once in a while just to check on your mental health and kind of let it all out. So if you're having issues like that, like be very careful, especially if you're like a heavy drinker, or if like you do drugs recreationally, and if you smoke pot and things like that, which I'm not condoning on here, but I'm just saying if you do that, those habits can be heavily exacerbated in dental school because you're under so much stress you're under so much pressure. And I've seen it happen to a lot of people where they just like really start drinking heavily to cope with the stress, or they just start smoking like a ton of pot. Some schools drug test. All schools have the right to drug test you at any point in time. You sign a contract when you go in, so be careful with that. If you pop positive, like you're out. Like just really no questions asked about it. So be careful with that. I also think it took me a while to find what study methods worked for me and how I studied most effectively. Because what worked for me in undergrad, unfortunately, did not work for me in dental school, and I really had to change my study habits, and that ended up being more Quizlets and more like typing out study guides and then underlining them and stuff versus just rote memorization where I could just read and be fine just because it's so much material. But yeah, you're going to have your weaknesses, but that goes back to leaning on your classmates and asking them for help, asking them for advice, asking them, hey, can we get together and like study at a coffee shop? Like I have a hard time like focusing and like staying off my phone. So like maybe if I'm with someone, it'll help me stay focused. So, do what you need to do, but it's very doable. You'll get through it. Just, keep your head up and just always remember that like this is what you prayed for. This is what you hoped for. This is what you wanted, is to be in school. So don't get too bogged down once you're finally here.
All right, so that is the end of our session. Thank you, Marco, for coming to talk to us about your experience. We appreciate you coming on. And just another reminder, you can check out our Instagram bio with our link tree for more information. There will not be a quiz today. And we just want to thank you once again. And that is all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.